Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Bakers Creek Memorial Ceremony, commemorating the 72nd anniversary of the air crash in Queensland, Australia, a tragedy that took the lives of 40 Army Air Corps members during World War II. To begin our ceremony, I ask that you please stand for the singing of the national anthem and remain standing for the invocation. The national anthem will be sung by Master Sergeant Leanne Hinton, one of the dynamic vocalists from the United States Army Band.
Almighty God, join us today as we gather to remember this sacred tragedy that occurred these 72 years ago, over 9,000 miles from this very spot. These memorials are sacred as we recall that no greater love has anyone than that they lay down their lives for their friends. Today we honor those 40 men who perished for their friends, while we remember the one who was spared. We honor our Australian comrades who rushed to provide care as they look desperately for survivors. As I ask you to consecrate these moments and these memories, Lord, I ask that you continue to bless the bond between our nations as we continue to share the burdens of protecting and defending peace everywhere, for security and for liberty. Bless and sustain the leaders of our nations and those who continue to stand in harm's way today, along with their precious families who still await their return. I ask these in your almighty name. Amen.
Amen. General Eberhart, Lieutenant General Wright, Dr. Cutler, and honored guests. Good morning. I'm honored to welcome you to Joint Base Myer Henderson Hall as we gather on this historic occasion, the 72nd anniversary of the crash at Bakers Creek. 6 years ago, this Bakers Creek Memorial was dedicated here at Joint Base Myer Henderson Hall to pay tribute to 40 American lives lost in the deadliest airplane crash in the Southwest Pacific Theater during World War II. It is fitting that the memorial found its home here, with the Arlington National Cemetery serving as the dramatic backdrop. The rows of tombstones serve to remind us of the many men and women who have served and given their lives for our great nation. So today, we gather to remember these soldiers. 40 members of the Army Air Corps assigned to the 317th Troop Carrier Group, a part of the U.S. 5th Air Force at the time, who lost their lives in an airplane crash at Bakers Creek near Mackie, Queensland, Australia on June 14, 1943. After much deserved R&R from the fight in the Pacific, these American patriots boarded their B-17 transport just before dawn to head back to New Guinea. There were 6 crew members and 35 passengers on board. The plane took off in a dense fog, and for reasons still unknown today, it crashed shortly after takeoff. All were killed except for one survivor, Corporal Foy Kenneth Roberts.
Tribute to those 40 lives lost. In a sad yet historical irony, the memorial marker is located here next to our Selfridge Gate, located just behind me. The gate is named after Lieutenant Thomas Selfridge, the U.S. Army soldier who was the first person to die in an airplane crash back in 1908, when he and Orville Wright rode in a test flight of the Wright Flyer at Fort Myer. The flyer they rode in crashed in the area of the parking lot just behind you. So this site pays tribute to the very first military air crash fatality and to 40 more souls of World War II. And as I said before, it is a fitting tribute in the shadow of Arlington National Cemetery, where we honor our nation's heroes. So too, we honor the heroes from Baker's Creek. We are just 2 days away from the actual day of the crash, June 14th, and that day has yet another historical significance. It is the day of the Army's birthday. This year, we celebrate the Army's 240th birthday, so this is a perfect opportunity to honor the service and sacrifices of all who have served in the ranks of the United States Army, their families, and to those who have fallen and paid for the freedoms that we enjoy today. Before I close, I would like to thank and recognize Dr. Robert Cutler. He is the son of the soldier, Captain Sam Cutler, who scheduled the Baker's Creek flight on that fateful day and saw the soldiers off just before the crash. It has been through Dr. Cutler's tireless efforts and those of the Baker's Creek Memorial Society that this memorial rests here today. Thank you, sir. And thank you all for joining us to honor these 40 American soldiers, to ensure this part of America's history is not forgotten, and to express gratitude to their families for having made the ultimate sacrifice. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. What an honor it is to be here this morning. There are two reasons, personally, I think this ceremony very important. First and foremost is that my father was a B-17 pilot in World War II. So this morning before I left my office, I took another glimpse of the picture I have on my desk with him and his crew of 8. Although they were in the European theater, they very well could have been at Baker's Creek that fateful day. I also am wearing his Army Air Corps ring this morning to honor his service and the service of those we honor today. Also, I served as a commander of 5th Air Force, an Air Force with a very proud history, the Air Force that operated in this theater of operations that proudly sports the Southern Cross constellation on its back. I'd like to thank Mike, you and your team. You do us proud with this ceremony and all that you've done to make it come together. Overright, Dr. Cutler and others are keeping this flame alive. It's so very, very important. And obviously our good friends, the Minister and the Air Commodore from the Embassy of Australia. Very few nations share the things in common that we share, even though we couldn't get farther apart on the globe. A common history, offspring of the Kingdom of Great Britain. Our frontiers are much alike as you look at our two nations, but most importantly, our citizens share common language, common values, and common goals. And they've been forged in fire from World War I to today's war against terrorism. I'd like to turn to the human aspect of this tragedy. As we said, 41 people, 40 who lost their lives. 40 who were on a well-deserved and well-earned rest and recreation away from the front lines. Don't want to litter your base here, Mike. I can only imagine the conversations that went on as they compared their homes to where they were in Australia. Homes that varied from New York to California, to Washington State to Florida, from Texas to North Dakota. Compared the landscape, the topography, the people, the food. They also talked, I'm sure, about their different duty stations and how things were alike and how things were different. And as military men always do, they talked about the chow. They talked about the chow. But most importantly, they talked about how the war was unfolding. How the war was unfolding, and I undoubtedly talked about the European theater of operations, because as we know, to a large extent, the Pacific theater was a holding action until victory was assured in Europe. Secondly, they had to reflect on the successes of the last year, the turning points in the war. April of '42, the Doolittle raid. May of 42, the Battle of Coral Sea. And to many, the true turning point of that war, June of 43, the Battle of Midway. And most recently to them, the expulsion of the Japanese from Guadalcanal in February of 43. And then the successive reoccupation of the Solomons and other islands in the Pacific. I said most important they talked about that, but maybe more importantly, they talked about their goals and their aspirations. They talked about what they've done, but more importantly, they talked about what they were going to do with their friends and their family back home. Sadly, aspirations, dreams, goals that were never realized because of what occurred on that tragic morning. When they boarded B-17, this early morning vixen, this EMF, in her previous incarnation was known as Pamela, a warship that had proven her worth because in December of 41, she returned to base with 1,100 bullet holes. 1,100 bullet holes. So in many cases, I would offer to you that this gallant group of men lost their life because of enemy fire. There's no doubt that affected how that B-17 flew and operated to that fateful day. I'm reminded of what was once said as a dedication of a cemetery in Italy by General George Patton. And he said, and I think so appropriately, today we should not mourn the loss of these men, but rather we should thank God that such men lived. Thank you very much.
Now it is my sincere honor to introduce the Australian Air Attaché and Assistant Defense Attaché from the Embassy of Australia, Air Commodore Gary Martin.
Ladies and gentlemen, our honoured guests and sir, remarkable words. It takes the whole story forward and makes it very, very true. But I'm here in our realm as we represent Australia here in the United States to give you our honesty and our sincere thoughts with you each and every day this goes down. Not just today as we celebrate June the 14th and what happened on that fateful morning. We're going to be here every year with every one of you as whole part. So Bob, from the embassy, from ourselves and the RAAF, okay, and our people back in Mackay that are thinking of you each and every day as they move forward into Saturday and what's going to be held there. And our sincere regrets this accident had to occur in the way that it did, but they will be remembered forever in that whole part. So thanks to you and your father for keeping those notes and for giving us the truth of the story that came out there. But as we've heard today, this is a sacrifice that all Australians do have memory of. It's going to be on our TV stations on the 14th. It's going to be in books, it's going to be in novels, and it's going to be in memories that are kept alive. Alive because you, as the United States of America, were there beside us in our desperate time of need. We've heard of those fateful times during the 42 and 43 when the victories were coming. But by gum, in the 40s and 41s, it was a tough going in the northern sides of Australia. We were getting bombed on our homeland on a daily basis, in some cases on an hourly basis. And it was these men who came forward out of a common agreement from all the different states here in the United States with one thought in their mind, to do right for those that are in strife. And by gum, they did an awesome job. We've heard about probably what was going through their minds on that particular day as they were heading back from an R&R, an incredibly well-earned R&R, and one that I'm led to believe by the writings I've found after discovering Baker's Creek was one that most Americans look forward to with great angst and laughter going back. But 2.5 minutes after takeoff on that foggy day, Victor Hotel, Charlie Bravo Alpha, as she's recorded in our annals back at home, being given an Australian registration, met a fateful death and came to rest in the fields. As we've heard, many people took part in their place to recover what they could, and thank God one person to walk out of that alive. So here today, let me give you my bond, my promise, that we in Australia will always remember you, our true and dear friends. Most importantly, we will always remember the men who perished in this fateful crash, and celebrate with you the victory that we have in our freedom and liberty, and that we're able to demonstrate with you, shoulder by shoulder, in all annals and places, in these wars and the future ones ahead. So thank you, and I salute the men who passed at Bakers Creek and Mackay. Thank you.
And now, to provide words of remembrance on behalf of the families and friends of the fallen, please welcome the Executive Director of the Bakers Creek Memorial Association, Dr. Robert S. Cutler.
Thank you all for being with us today. And thank you, Colonel Henderson, General Eberhard, and Air Commodore Martin. On behalf of the families and friends of the crash victims from 23 states across the United States, we thank you for your thoughtful remarks, your leadership, and for your continued support for our bi-national cause, to commemorate the tragedy at Bakers Creek and to affirm the values that those 40 members of the Army Air Corps died for in World War II. I will give a special recognition to retired Air Force Lieutenant General Bruce Wright, also a past commander of the U.S. 5th Air Force, who has worked for months behind the scenes to help bring us together here today. Like other patriotic commemorations at this time of the year, we believe it indeed our duty to pay tribute and to remember that these fallen warriors did not die in vain. 2 decades ago in Australia, as a symbol of gratitude and friendship for the American servicemen who protected them from enemy invasion during the war, the citizens of Mackay built a permanent monument near the crash site at Bakers Creek. These fallen members of the U.S. Army Air Corps also deserve to be remembered here in Washington, D.C. Please stand and welcome retired Army Lieutenant Colonel C.K. Gailey and Colonel Colin Benson, the RSL historian from Australia. Colonel Gailey will read the names of the fallen as we place flowers of remembrance next to the monument, followed immediately by a moment of silence. Then Colonel Benson will recite the Ode, a traditional Australian battlefield benediction. If any of you wish to place a flower, please come forward and take one from the orderly to the right and place it in the green basket next to the monument.
Private First Class Jerome Abraham. Captain John O. Berthold. Technician 5th Class William A. Briggs. Sergeant Dean H. Buss. Technical Sergeant James A. Copeland. Sergeant Carl A. Cunningham. Staff Sergeant Lovell Dale Curtis. Technician 5th Class George A. Ehrman. Flying Officer William C. Erb. Private James E. Finney. Sergeant Leo E. Fletcher, Technical Sergeant Alfred H. Freza, First Lieutenant Vern J. Gidcombe Jr., Private First Class Norman J. Getz, Staff Sergeant Roy A. Hatlin, Staff Sergeant John W. Hilsheimer, Private First Class Vernon Johnson, Sergeant Donald B. Kuiper, Sergeant Charlie O. LaRue, Private Raymond D. Longabaugh, Private First Class Kenneth W. Mann, Corporal Marlon D. Metzger, Private Charles D. Montgomery, Second Lieutenant Jack A. Ogren, Private First Class John W. Parker, Private First Class Frank S. Penska, Major George N. Powell, Sergeant Anthony Rudnick, Corporal Charles W. Sampson, Private First Class Arnold Seidel, Corporal Jacob O. Skaggs Jr., Corporal Franklin F. Smith, Corporal Raymond H. Smith, Private First Class Frederick C. Sweet, Corporal Edward Tenney, Sergeant David E. Tileston, Private First Class Dale Van Fossen, Private Reuben L. Vaughn, Staff Sergeant Frank E. Welchel, Private First Class Charles M. Williams.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget.